Well, we've all had a lot of fun this weekend, and we've heard some fantastic speakers, and we've learned a tremendous amount from them. So where do we go from here? What you have to do now, folks, is really get down to work. We need, as we leave this vacation and get a little bit of rest, because I'm sure everybody's exhausted, but we need to get out, pound the pavement, and get every American citizen out to vote. And with that note, I would like to introduce our next speaker. He is president of American Majority, Matt Bozell. Matt, come on up, please. Matt has been a leader in the Leadership Institute, and as president of American Majority, this is one of the foremost organizations in the country to teach people about how they can become active and how they can show their love for their country. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. Grab this. I appreciate being introduced as the fun is over guy. I really appreciate that, Joe. No, it's Joe asked me to come and give everybody the homework assignment for the next 9.5, 10 months, because although we're still going to hear from a dynamic presidential candidate today, of course, we have to think ahead of this time of the heat and the storm and the battle, the primaries, and think about how we're going to execute in those final few months, and especially those final few weeks, and even those final very few days. How many of us have lived through, unfortunately, some textbook perfect turnout campaigns on the receiving end from the other side in 2008 and 2012? How many of us have seen our hopes dashed and seen the other side effectively and efficiently and mechanically and dominantly execute social media, ground game, volunteers, media messaging, regular messaging, and candidate messaging all together at once in this sort of perfect storm? That's what I'm here to talk about. How many of you have been to an American Majority training anywhere, anytime? How many of you have heard of American Majority? I hope you have. We've trained about 35,000 folks in the last 7.5, 8 years. We're very happy to have put about 3,000 folks into races as candidates. About 1 in 10 people that we've trained has run for office. You can imagine the sacrifice that requires, and the effort, and the family time, and the financial sacrifice it requires to run for office. We've got hundreds of people in office today because of us, but really because of their own decision to take matters in their own hand. Mr. DeWeese was exactly right a few minutes ago. The folks in office do not feel pain unless you inflict it upon them. So until such time as you are completely fed up and decide to get some skin in the game, as you know all too well, and keep mustering those volunteers behind the candidate of your choice, the cause of your choice, there will be no change. Let's get right into it, and let's talk about it. You can see on the screens, you can see our sort of chutes and ladders map. I'm going to go through this really fast, try not to give anybody whiplash, and try to get us to the Dr. Carson hour very quickly before we go very much deeper into the day. When you start with a get-out-the-vote strategy, how many of us have executed get-out-the-vote plans before? How many of us have pounded the pavement, knocked the doors, made the calls, enlisted at the phone banks, on it goes? Good. Everybody in this room should be doing this at least the final week or two of the campaign. When's the election this year? What date? I'm sorry, the real election, the presidential election. When's the presidential election? November 8th. So let's circle that on the calendar and make sure I can get my screens to advance here. What does it mean? Why does it matter? What does getting out the vote matter? Does it change elections? How so? How many percentage points can you increase a local election with get out the vote efforts? 1 to 3 percentage points. Would you gladly take 1 to 3 percentage points in a local election? I sure as heck would. That's an earthquake in a lot of cases. See if I can get this to go a little faster here. I'm sorry for my screens. We know what get out the vote is. We've talked about it before. Look at all these concepts, whether it's person to person, whether it's talking to people about the issues that matter most to them, whether it's guns, whether it's fiscal, whether it's home and security, those sorts of issues. You have to relate to folks where they live and breathe. Do we alter our conversations as conservatives? Do we lead with the right things in every conversation we have with voters? No. Is it always, always, always the best example to lead with Agenda 21 in a conversation at a voter's door? Exactly. You guys are very savvy. We lead with what the voter wants to discuss, right? Is that pandering? How many say yes? Smart. Joe says smart, so I'm going to stop right there. You lead with what the voter wants to discuss. Are you hiding who you are? Are you hiding what you stand for? As it comes in the conversation, are you going to discuss happily your values, your priorities, your imperatives, your aims? Absolutely. But you talk about what voters are most concerned with in their personal life. In the past, we've done this in the last few hours, the last few days rather, the last 72 hours. That's not going to happen anymore. Look at that percentage. Almost 1 in 4 votes were cast early. Absentee ballots, early voting, for any reason, no excuse, no threshold provided, none needed. It's only going to get worse. Online voting's on the horizon. People are looking for ways to game the system. People are looking for ways to make it easier and remove all barriers for their voters. I see some shaking heads out there. It's a tactic. It's a technique. It's political technology, and we can use it the same way the other side uses it. We can figure out and master how to do the same things they do. We call Get Out the Vote in the American majority, we call it live personal contacts. I'll stop right there and let it sink in for a second. Live personal contacts. Just like the back of the shampoo bottle. Rinse, repeat, over and over again. What happens when you speak to a voter about the issues that are most pressing to them? You win their confidence. We build a rapport. You start a relationship. What happens, on the other hand, when you buy 1.2 million robocalls on election day and start pushing those buttons and auto-dialing? Any value? How many in the room hang up when a robocall comes through? And we're political junkies, right? So if we're hanging up, the average voter has not a prayer hearing our message. Everything else that people in the past have called Get Out the Vote is not true. Gerber and Green are 2 pretty smart PhDs at Yale. They've done several versions of their book called Get Out the Vote. They talk very bluntly. Face-to-face canvassing raises turnout rates approximately 44% to 53% in elections. So you can half your times your impact again by going face-to-face. Is it easy? No. Is it simple? No. Yes. You see the difference in those 2 words. Something that's easy is not always simple, right? Something that's simple is not always easy. The idea of going door to door relentlessly, like the old Electrolux salesman, like the old Fuller Brush man, the old Bible salesman, over and over again, a very simple, elegant concept. The actual perseverance, the actual rubber meets the road, the actual implementation of volunteers, finding those warm and not so warm bodies to go door to door and talk to volunteers is tedious. It's time consuming. It's labor intensive. If it wasn't, I can assure you we would have no hope in elections today with unions on the left, with OFA. What's OFA, by the way? What does OFA stand for? Organizing for America, or Action, whichever one it's morphed into these days. By the way, the biggest decision I waited for all year long was whether or not the Barack Obama campaign, OFA, the grassroots arm of the Barack Obama campaigns from 2008 and 2012, was actually going to sell or lease its data to the DNC. When did that happen? About 4 months ago. They leased and started selling their data. For the first time ever, the data from 2 presidential campaigns did not go directly to the party headquarters. That was a first. They've privatized it and used capital and used free markets against us for the first time. Next slide, please. I'm sorry? I say it sure is changing America, isn't it? It is. The data and the information that's at the fingertips of those on the other side is scary. Let's go through what happened 4 years ago. I throw up 4 numbers in a row. These are numbers we should all sort of tremble and quake at. 5,117 separate staging locations for Get Out the Vote efforts across America. That's separate block parties, separate precinct organizations, separate houses or households and neighborhoods from which they led Get Out the Vote. OFA led Get Out the Vote efforts. 799,000, I'm sorry, let's go back a little bit. 799,000 separate shifts. Those are just shifts of volunteers that went to work for the other side on Election Day 2012. This is one day, one 24-hour period. 1,700,000 or more actual voters registered through those shifts, through those locations, those 5,000 locations, those 698,000 shifts, and 125,000, or million rather, live voter contacts. Those include doors and live phone calls. Not a single robocall, not a single Facebook message, not a single tweet, live voter contacts. Did we have the same effort on our side in 2012? We did not. We have forgotten more than we ever knew. In 2004, we understood get out the vote. In 2000, we understood get out the vote. Shoe leather, elbow grease, organization, phone trees, all now married to databases and social media, plus thousands and thousands of local trainings. That T word makes my ears perk up because that's what I do for a living. OFA, the left, unions, all the coalitions on that side relentlessly execute what they call knock and drag. What's knock and drag? Anybody know what that means? If you answer the door, you're going to vote. That's the union mentality, knock and drag. They execute this endlessly. We've got to be ready to teach our folks to do this. Numbers like this don't happen overnight. They happen because of years of investment. How long do we have till the election, the big election this year? Is that enough time to put together a robust, solid, get-out-the-vote plan on the ground? There's no excuse with 9 or 10 months on the calendar. We circle the date in red on the calendar. We work backwards from it. It's a horrible, sinking feeling on Election Day to look at your leaders, to look at your candidates, to look at your parties. I'm here to tell you, nobody's coming to save us, right? Nobody's going to do it except us. Nobody's going to push and buoy forth the candidate and the causes of our choice like we will. No one else is going to send the cavalry or an army. They had a chief technology platform, a chief technology officer rather, who simply asked one question: how can I make things more efficient? How can I marry data, volunteers, social media, messaging? How can I simplify it and make sure everybody's on the same page? Again, we used to do these things effortlessly in the past with our voters, with our coalitions, our people who believed in the things we do, and we've forgotten that in the past several years. The next screen, please. So Election Day 2012, I think we'd go in. Obama had 300,000 volunteers on one day. Did we have anywhere near that amount? No. Who was in Boston Garden on Election Day 2012? Remember Orca? What was Orca in 2012? A mess. Our failed technology platform, our sort of abortive technology platform that didn't go through. We have to match these numbers. If we can go to the next slide. 109,000 Obama volunteers knocked on how many doors? 7 million doors. Where do you think those doors were on Election Day 2012? Were they in inner cities? No. Where were they? Swing districts, swing counties, Ohio, Pennsylvania, places like that that sway the vote every single time. 18 million live contacts. Sad fact, but true. 3-to-1 Obama and OFA contacts in favor of that side. Yes, ma'am. That's right.
How many for the other side?
It was 1 to 10. It was 10 to 1. 30,000 on Election Day for our side. Pretty bleak. Pretty sad. I mean, biblical, Gideon-esque type numbers. I'm sorry? I love the question of voter fraud, and I won't have a mini seminar about it right now at the moment, because my philosophy is always to win by a margin large enough to where voter fraud doesn't matter. Every single time. Do you understand? We'll get to that in a second. Do you understand what a vote goal is? Should you know in your precinct, in your neighborhood, in your subdivision, should you know in your county, should you know in your state what the typical turnout is, what the typical historical turnout in elections are? Can you find those numbers easily? Can you run the numbers for the past 4 cycles, the past 4 elections, and figure out what your rough number should be? Can you add 20% to that number? And can you work like hell to get those extra bodies, those extra people out to vote? We can. So we can defeat even their worst efforts should they do the full playbook of what we would call voter fraud. Should they do the motor voter and the entire Affordable Health Care Act, sign up all at once along with a voter registration form. You can defeat all that with the right numbers and the right planning. The goal subsequently achieved by the Obama campaign was live conversations. I sound like a broken record. Live conversations with targeted voters. What's that T word, that second T word that excites me besides training? Targeted. You're never going to persuade some voters. You're never going to persuade some voters to simply care. There are lots of independents in decline to states, and there's lots of conservatives who don't register by party, who won't come out, period, who aren't motivated. If their man or woman doesn't win this primary, they're not going to come out in the general. If you can't persuade them, how are you going to go across the aisle to the other side and convince even blue dog Dems and independents and maybe other parts of the coalitions on their side? We've got to spend our time on our targeted voters. Let's talk about 7 real super quick techniques about get out the vote that work, that are tried and true, that many of you have executed in your personal lives, your political histories, and you're going to do again hopefully this fall. There's that word again, personal contact, live conversations. I'm not going to repeat it again, but they are the gold standard of politics. It's about people talking to people. How many of you have seen, here's an oldie but a goodie, the old movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding. How many people in this room have seen it? And how many of you, just like a month ago, remember 1 month ago, around Christmas time, lines were around buildings, tickets were selling out for the new Star Wars movie, all over again. So back in 1990, whatever, when My Big Fat Greek Wedding came out, how many of you were in lines around theaters waiting to see that film? None? None of you? So how did everybody in this room, almost, end up seeing that film? Word of mouth, every single time. A $3 million movie produced by Tom Hanks' wife, $3 million cost, has made almost $500 million at this point in American movie ticket sales because somebody went to go see it, somebody took a date night to it, somebody told their brothers, their families, their husbands, their wives. It's a great movie. Same thing with voters. You talk to people and you build rapport where it is. Every 14 voters you touch, and when I say the word touch, I mean you knock on their door, you talk to them in live phone calls, not a rehearsed robotic script, a real question. Who are you? How are you doing? Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Do you think government's too big or too small? Are you approving of the health care expansion in America? Those 3 simple questions will largely tell you what you need to know about people and their stances and their philosophies towards politics. Every 14 people you talk to, you get 1 in your tally. You get 1 in your bucket that's going to vote for you that wasn't going to before. Again, the Gerber and Green study ranks these in order. Door-to-door is always number 1. Leafleting in person, live calls with volunteers, and so forth and so on. Do you see a pattern? Do you see a trend when you go down this list? The easier the activity, the less the payoff. The actual easier the technique, the less the payoff. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes gas in the minivans, it takes gas in the SUVs, it takes food for the volunteers to go out and talk to people, and it eats up your entire day. And I'll show you a shortcut how to make that faster, too. I'm sorry. I'll go back for you, ma'am. You can take a photograph of that. This will all be available, too. I'll make it available to Joe and the entire site. And it's always available on AmericanMajority.org. Define your goals. I talked about this. Here's your super secret weapon, a 4-page vote goal worksheet. 4 pages. How many of us can get a pencil and a pen and do a 4-page worksheet? Very simply. Take 2012, 2008, take the midterms in between those, and average the numbers. Figure out what the vote total is going to be. You'll see. You'll see exactly who's going to come out, even in a high turnout, high intensity, open seat for president just like this fall. And the intensity is going to be on our side, I believe, with a desired change, but you can figure out mathematically exactly how many votes you need and, more importantly, where you will need them. Which precincts are going to be the swings? Which precincts are going to yield 60, 70, 90% of the voters every single time, because that's the way the districts are drawn. That's the way the precincts are drawn. I didn't make the maps. You didn't make the maps. We play with the ball. We play with the system that we have, right? We expedite it, and we make it work. Start at election day, as I said, and work backwards. Keep TV, direct mail, robocalls, and yard signs in perspective. What do I mean when I say this? How many of us get discouraged when we see a flurry of advertising or a flurry of commercials or a flurry of radio? It impacts us, right? We get discouraged. We get brought down. I'm here to tell you, David can beat Goliath almost every time. If you execute, keep your nose to the grindstone, keep your ear to the ground, keep going with those executing ground plans that you've started 6, 7, 9 months ago. You'll pull off an upset because you've been working in the neighborhoods and in the precincts months before they started deluging them with ads. Look at this, $6 billion in 2012. How many of us got a piece of that? Nobody? I'm shocked. I am shocked. With apologies to any consultants in the room. $3 billion to broadcast TV. Where's that money going? Is that wasted money or wisely invested money? That's right, absolutely. The other side spends a lot of money on it. What's the commission rate on a commercial television ad buy? Anybody know? Every time that you see a commercial, a consultant gets paid 30% of what it costs to place that ad. Donald Trump was right. CNN should have paid him for the ratings bonanza that second and third debate gave them. The rates went up, the buys went up, the media placement went up, and the consultants got a lot richer. $1 billion to cable. Is cable targeted? Is it targeted? Everything's targeted, Joe says. Is everything targeted on TV? Yes. I would respectfully disagree, unless they're using cable spotlight, which is a very particular product. Does a TV producer, does a television executive know who's going to be in the room when the television turns on? Does he know who's going to stay in the room or walk through the room or be making breakfast or getting kids ready for school or going to work or whatever it is? It's a very scattershot approach. We would say over and over again, recommend targeting at the grassroots level, targeting at the ground game level. Look at the other $1 billion after you pay the media parasites. $1 billion, voter contact, mail, phones, digital, field, a ton of which goes straight to United States Postal Service stamps and bulk rate permits and postage over and over again. Can't do without it. It's a part and a fact of life. $4.6 billion was spent in the midterm in 2014. Again, we would tell you to humbly go back to the basics. Look at your neighborhoods, your precincts, your counties, your state, your region. Look at the states that have electoral college votes. Look at the counties that swing those states. It's math, rinse, repeat. A word about yard signs. How many of us think that we're going to win the election by placing that final 4x8 gigantic banner on the most beautiful, appropriate, perfect hill in the entire town? Right. You win. You win the entire election. I'm not sure why we have this mentality. Again, Mr. DeWeese talked about this. He talked about us having this idea that by doing one shot and one final salvo or one blow, we'll win somehow and be able to take our toys and go home. I guess we get this from Star Wars, where we blow up the Death Star at the end of the movie. But what happens next every single time? The empire always strikes back, right? Always. And so you have to be cognizant of wasting time, wasting money more importantly, and wasting volunteer effort to go put these signs up and down. Signs don't vote. Signs rarely persuade. Signs, if you've done everything else in a grassroots ground game plan, if you've done everything else, I mean you have gone back and talked to every voter who has indicated they would likely vote for your candidate or your cause 3, 4, 7 times. If you've done all of that and talked to them on the phone with live volunteer phone calls and dropped them real personal mail, if you've done all of that, then I will let you go put yard signs wherever you would like to your heart's delight. But until such time, yes, ma'am.
Yard signs in your own yard.
Amen.
Very effective.
Amen. Again,
People tell me all the time, we know where you stand, we're going to vote with you.
again, because you are using that personal conversation. It's a silent conversation. You're using your influence as a peer and a neighbor and a close associate of all those people that live around you to show them physically, tangibly. I'm talking about the battles deep within the medians in towns and in cities all around the country. Direct mail, good for raising your profile, good for raising your name ID, raising money at the start of a campaign, but not for turning out the vote. I'm here to tell you there's no substitute for homeschoolers, for HOA friends. I know HOAs are problematic sometimes, for neighbors, for PTA members, for church and fellow parishioners, for co-worshipers, family who can't really resist the draft and go with you on the weekends and on the weeknights. There's no substitute for taking folks out and meeting voters where they live and breathe. Even if someone disagrees strongly with you or is on the fence about a candidate or a cause, what do you tell them when you show up at their door and speak to them about getting out the vote? What are you communicating to them by showing up in person? I care enough to stop everything I'm doing, bring these other folks with me, and talk to you about the fate of our nation, the direction of our country, and what's about to happen right here in our locality. There's still, especially down south, which I'm very grateful about, there's still an unwritten code of hospitality where folks will listen to you and let you in. Robocalls we think are almost valueless. Robocalls perhaps early on in a campaign to define, to create contrast, to create the actual idea of a difference between candidates, perhaps an introductory phase of a campaign, not good in the final days. Actual volunteer phone calls, actual having live voices. And by the way, can folks tell when you're smiling on the phone? How can they tell that? Your voice changes, your vocal cords stretch, your entire throat sort of changes. There's that T word again. We're almost done here, Joe. Always target. Look at the lists. Where do we get our voter files from in South Carolina? Where? The Board of Elections. Elsewhere, it's the county clerk. Sometimes it's Secretary of State. This is 2016. Is there any excuse not to have voter information, current voter database information? No, there is not. You can say that I don't understand database technology. You can say I don't understand Excel spreadsheets for that matter. You can say I don't like dealing in data. Someone you know does. Someone you can hire part-time does. Someone intern you can put on your campaign as a grassroots volunteer does. There's no reason to not understand data, to slice it and dice it and sift through it and find the targets, the people who voted in the past and who will do it again. Past behavior, I know we don't like to face this as liberty-minded, freedom-loving Americans and conservatives, but past behavior almost always indicates future performance. That's why every firm in America buys your data every time you swipe your grocery card, every time you rent a film, every time you go to a movie, every time you purchase anything online. That data is packaged, sliced, diced, and sold because they want to sell you more of what you're already doing. Voting is no different. Effective GOTV, there's that E word. Effective GOTV always targets, always finds those folks that it can motivate and turn out. I'll give you a few scenarios in rapid fire. Our walk list today, independent women, ages 35 through 55, who are homeowners and feel strongly about education. That's a certain pitch. That's a certain speech on that certain Friday or Saturday or Sunday. Are you going to go in and talk about guns to those voters? That's not your first topic. If they ask you, are you going to run from the issue? Not ever. But you're going to talk about what they want to know. You're going to talk about what they want to hear about. It's not changing who you are. Our phone bank, our live phone bank, I should have said today, is Republican males, not independents, Republican males, age 40 to 50, low intensity. What's a low intensity voter? If you're lucky, they only come out during generals. They think about it every 4 to 8 years and come out and vote when they feel motivated. They're kind of like turtles. Homeowners and feel strongly about guns. These people have a certain issue in mind. Yes, ma'am?
So, I know how to get the individual, the age, how they vote.
Right?
But how do you get homeowner and gun rights? Where can you go to get that information? I know you got to pay for it, but where?
You don't always have to pay for it. You can always do a subscription to a small database company. There's lots of those out there. I think AFP has one. We have one. There's 5 to 7 available right now on the center right if you want to use those. But all these issues that you're talking about are issues of public record. Homeownership's public record. That should be appended to the voter file in most cases. The other issues of guns and education are issue surveys. I assure you, people have been to the doors of most of these voters, these high-intensity turnout voters, and asked them about issues. And that'll be recorded in databases that you can have access to. I'll talk about that in 2 seconds. One more subgroup, Republican women, 25 through 45. That's a different slice, right? Self-identifying partisan Republican women, low-intensity voters who don't own their home and feel strongly about pro-life. That's a separate conversation. That's talking about separate issue altogether, and that's taking into concerns the fact of their life. Surveys and door scripts must be targeted so the messages and questions you're asking are tailored to your audience. The Obama campaign was alpha, beta testing, A/B testing scripts in 2012. They were asking folks what they cared most about. Why did they ask them early in the year what their most burning, passionate issue was? Why would they ask a volunteer or a voter, rather, in March what they cared most about?
So they could craft the messaging at the door.
So they could what?
Craft the messaging at the door.
That's right. That final few days, you hit that hot button. Is that manipulative? Is that emotional? Is it? Is it? You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. I'm glad to hear you say that. We are all creatures. It's smart. Thank you. We are all creatures of emotion. We are all creatures of passion. And there's all different things that move all of us. Be smart and play along. Almost there. Pay attention to the right metrics. Vanity metrics. I see campaigns that love to go out and talk about how many 5x7 cards they've dropped, how many door hangers they've dropped, which have their place, which have their use, but they don't actually go and knock on those doors and wait for a response. They don't actually talk to voters. They don't actually spend the 2.5 minutes. 2.5 minutes times each household times an entire list takes a long day, takes a long weekend, takes into the night. They talk about other things that sort of make the appearance of motion. We want real metrics. We want things you can actually discern. Live conversations, surveys completed, and total unique data tags. What's a data tag? When you asked those 3 questions earlier that I mentioned, is government too big or too small? Do you like the Affordable Health Care Act? You know, these kind of questions, you append that in the database immediately. No more barcodes, no more taking the information back on a spreadsheet to headquarters, doing it in real time right there at the door. How many of us in 2016 are finally ready to adopt and use handheld database technology? How many of us? I'm thrilled to see it. It's not all of us yet. It's not enough of us yet, but it's coming. Do you think the left, do you think the progressive left understands how to live and breathe on a 4-inch screen all the time? Do you think they are at your door and at their voters' doors entering information as they ask questions every single time they encounter a voter? Is it kind of creepy to talk to a voter while you're doing this? Should you be doing it like this? And so, do you believe government is too big? How should you be doing it? If you can't remember the yes or no answers to 3 simple questions that you've learned at someone's door for 30 seconds while you go to the end of the driveway and re-enter it into the database, you should not be doing this. Right? Yes, ma'am. You can. A great tip. And you can make little simple mnemonic devices to yourself, whatever it is. There's usually not going to be more than 3 to 4 questions in one of these database technology companies' surveys. So try to recall what they said. Look them in the eye. Yes, ma'am. How late can I call without it being a faux pas? I wouldn't call after dark, as a rule. Yeah. Well, it depends on where you are and when in the year. By election time, it's going to be starting to get dark again, right? You can do dinner time. Yeah, dinner time, 7. I wouldn't call past 8. That's sort of the telemarketer do not call list time anyway. I wouldn't do that. But have my phone banks going from 9, typically to almost 9, almost every single day. I know we're not comfortable with database technology. We're here to talk about it and talk about it openly and talk about how to do it properly. Connecting social media as opposed to years ago, reporters and one campaign staffer, one manager, having drinks, sharing stories, sharing leaks, whatever it is. What is it now? Everybody's got a platform now, right? We have to sift through all the messaging, all the lies, all the detritus, all the time and figure out what's what. All the channels. How many of us are active on one platform on social media? Just one. Email. That's the ultimate platform. I love it. How many of us use 2 or more platforms on social media? How many of us use 3 or more platforms on social media? 4 or more platforms on social media? Any hands? Did we lose them all? There's one there. How many do you use, sir, total? 4 or 5. So you are a busy bee online. Most of us run up against what? Time restrictions. The ability to channel our messages and get them where we want. You have to understand, though, that social media has made every one of us a messenger, every one of us an ambassador. Yes, ma'am? My Twitter is Matthew B. Robbins. MattheWBRobbins. Matthew B. Robbins. But I don't tweet about politics most of the time, I have to admit. But we'll talk about it. Why do I have to not tweet about politics all the time? What's the power of Twitter? Come on up on the... No, I'm just kidding. Twitter wants to see who? You don't have to tweet. Facebook wants to see who? What does Facebook want to see? What do people who see your profile, what do they want to see when they log on? A real person. You can sprinkle your politics in. You can discuss the issues of the day. You can weave them into your narrative and your timelines. But if you talk politics 24/7, 365, and do it in all caps every single day, every single night, are you going to get through to folks? No, you're not. Yes, ma'am. You got to speak up.
The biggest reason why people don't vote is they think that their vote doesn't count. And my message to all of them is 2012, 126 million people voted, but almost 100 million stayed home. The people who don't vote have the biggest power in the country. And I tweet that out all the time, and they're surprised to hear it.
Motivation is key. I will not deny that. I am not asking anyone to hide their political preferences or beliefs. Period. But there's a difference in messaging and in beating people over the head with it all the time, right? 500, roughly more, a few more than 500,000 votes decided the 2012 election. Did you know that? In 4 or 5 electoral college states, 500,000 plus votes decided the votes in those states. Could you persuade, could you message, could you talk to enough of your friends, family, relatives, peers, co-workers, co-worshipers through social media and in-person techniques? Could you reach those numbers through the group we have here this weekend? Probably. Small, attainable numbers. Yes, ma'am.
What are the 3 things that you would say would motivate someone to vote? I keep seeing motivate on your screen. What are those things that motivate you?
If someone has no history of voting, zero, it's going to be a difficult struggle. It is. You've got to find someone who's voted before in that voter file, find an issue that relates to them, and speak to them at least 3 times in person. 3 face-to-face contacts. Another 2 live phone calls. Another piece of dropped mail. That's your 7 total touches.
That's a lot of effort.
It is. That's why I tell you to go for who? The targeted voters. The voters who have typically and historically turned out in cycles past. Yes, ma'am.
Last night I came home exhausted, was watching Fox News, and Cruz changed his vote from yay to nay, or nay to yay, whatever.
American majority is nonpartisan.
And he said, I know that, but he said that he didn't really know what he was voting for. But my roommate from college is married to Pat Roberts, and he voted for Pat Roberts. So what I have is factual that he lied about it from my
So
roommate.
Social media has allowed all of us to do what? To take Vine videos, to take Periscope videos, Meerkat clips, to take any sort of multimedia we want and post it instantly. And then the audience can decide what's true and what's not.
I've got the wife of the senator, you know, she was dumb, she didn't.
Video's hard to refute. Yes, ma'am.
Our mayor won by 1 point.
I hear this everywhere I go. Our mayor won by how many votes? 1 vote. How many of us could turn out 1 extra vote? That spouse, that reluctant friend or spouse. Bernie Sanders, I have an office in Vermont right now. American Majority has a state chapter in Vermont right now. Bernie Sanders became the mayor of Burlington by 12 votes. Way back when. How much fun would it have been? I mean, it's a good time to watch Bernie now, but how much fun would it be to have stopped Bernie way back when? Elections, I hate to quote our community organizer-in-chief, but elections have consequences, right? They do. Yes, sir.
To answer the question, motivate people, all people do all things based on what is good for them.
Absolutely. The pleasure principle. Absolutely. A carrot and a stick. All people do everything based on what's good for them. If they feel a rising tide, if they feel momentum, if they feel a sunny optimism, if they see their neighbors, their friends, their family, their coworkers, if they feel a groundswell, if they see evidence, whether it's that 1 yard sign in the yard or those 3 door knocks or those 2 live phone calls, if they see that building and they see that offer, that appealing offer being made to them, and I'm not a nasty conservative, I'm like Mike Pence, I'm a conservative, but I'm not in a bad mood about it. If they see that and they want to go along with it, that's a natural law of human attraction. It's a natural law of human affinity. I don't understand sometimes why that's so difficult for us to understand on social media or in person. It's the same technique. Are car dealerships selling vehicles online today? Yes, they are. Are they selling them in person today still? Yes, they are. Are they selling them on the radio? Yes, they are. Are they selling them on TV? Yes, they are. People are selling everywhere. It's a very, very sclerotic, fast-paced society we live in. Politics, like it or not, and I say it with a smile on my face, politics, like it or not, we have a product. Our product is our cause. Our product is our platform. Our product is our beliefs. Our product is our candidate. Our product is ourselves. When you show up at a door and you're wearing ratty jeans and flip-flops and a T-shirt and you're not shaven or not coiffed or not groomed properly, what's the product being sold to that voter? It ain't the product you want to sell, I'll put it that way. There is a certain product being pushed every single time, and like it or not, we are a consumeristic society that receives, absorbs, swallows, regurgitates information, data, marketing, pitches, all these things. You know it. You've been living it lots longer than I have in many cases, and you're going to do it the same thing in your voting lives. Let's finish this up really quick. Almost 9 in 10 of social media users are registered voters. What does that tell you? Hunt where the ducks are. Go where the money is. Get those folks in. Scoop them up as much as you can. Talk on social media. If you're not familiar with any social media platform, maybe it's time. You don't have to be on 5, but be on 1 or be on 2. And don't let it rule your life, but certainly be informed and inform the folks who know you. Did I see another hand way back?
How do you overcome overconfidence?
Oh, gosh. Overconfidence. I don't think we suffer from that right now, do we? I'm sorry.
And they know it's going to go that way, and they don't feel like their vote counts. How do you get them
Well, I would call that apathy. I wouldn't call that overconfidence. I would call people who think that nothing's going to change the ultimate outcome of the election, I would call that apathy. And that's a personal appeal. This is a lot like missionary work. This is a lot like evangelism, small batch evangelism. You're going door to door, going house to house, reconnecting with folks on an individual basis. Again, it's tedious, it's time consuming, it's labor intensive. Believe me, if it could be automated, if they could push a button at the DNC or at the Libertarian Party headquarters, such as they are, or even at the Green Party headquarters, such as they are, and motivate all of their survey answering, philosophically aligned voters, they would. There's no substitute for going out and meeting folks where they live and breathe. There's just not. We are social creatures. 25%, look at this. Here's that Peter principle. Here's that pleasure principle, rather. 25% of social network users have gotten more involved in an issue or a site after reading about it on another site. Like begets like. The Rolling Stone, the momentum, all of those things go to each other. Look at this. This is an old stat. 64% of Americans own a smartphone, and they do everything now. They can slice and dice anything, any part of American life you want. There's an app for that, right? There's an app for literally everything. There's an app for voter fraud, for photographing voter fraud. 1 in every 5 minutes in the U.S. is spent on a mobile device in the U.S. on Facebook or Instagram. Those are the two big ones right now at this freeze frame moment in 2016. What's Instagram? Pictures. Very little text, if any text. I firmly believe we'll be going to a moment in time very soon on social media where there's no text whatsoever, only emojis and hieroglyphics, right? No text. And as much as we want to win the argument as conservatives, I mean, we really want to win the argument, right? We want to prove, finally, with our 14-point plan, why the flat tax is superior to the fair tax, right? Period. Is most of America waiting for that argument? No, they are not. I think I heard one young voice say yes, that's great. Most Americans are waiting to feel good and to move toward a goal with the rest of their countrymen. Researchers say that young people who are active online are twice as likely to vote as those who are not. Again, it's another channel. It's not going away. It's not a fad. It's here to stay. Love it, hate it, curse it. It's here. We organize online for offline action. Can you get folks to tell you where they live online? Sounds kind of creepy, right? Can you get folks to tell you how they're going to vote online? Yes, they can. Yes, you can. You can start conversations. You can start things that go elsewhere and find like-minded folks and supporters with simple tweets, simple posts on Facebook, even simple pictures on Instagram. Our most popular Facebook post of all time, our most popular one. We've done tens of thousands over the past 7.5, 8 years. We posted a simple photo of the vets, the World War II vets, who were denied access to the memorial in Washington, D.C. when the government shutdown was threatened and the Department of the Interior closed the monuments, closed an open-air monument. We put up a picture on Facebook, and it was shared and liked and passed around more than anything else. It drew like-minded people our way. Find groups that believe in the things you believe. Are you talking to different fellow travelers? Are you talking to libertarians? Are you talking to declined estates? Are you talking to independents? Are you talking to disaffected Republicans? Are you talking to blue dog Democrats? Are you talking to crazy, wacko, tinfoil helmet wearing people? Are you talking to all kinds of people all the time? Should you? Absolutely. If they believe in some of the things that you believe in, you should be reaching out to them instead of ostracizing them all the time. Build your email list. Online petitions have a value to a point. Getting people to sign up at tables and booths for swag and giveaways. Human nature again. Show folks what you're doing. Share status updates and pictures of campaign staff and volunteers. Again, make them see the activity. Make them realize the value for them. Draw those flies with honey. Chronicle your campaign in real time. What is real time, by the way? Live streaming, like we're doing right now. Real time. Don't wait to update. Don't wait and come back a day or two later and show them what you did over the weekend. Show them now. Everybody wants to know right now. The campaign website has to be the center of all your online activity, and you must build an online community. I'm telling you, if you're not taking the time to either learn these techniques yourself or find someone who knows them already and employing them on your campaign or on your grassroots initiative or whatever the cause of your choice is, you are missing a full half of the ball game. It's not comfortable for all of us. We'd like to go do the same things we've always done. What are the same things we've always done gotten us so far? Not victory, not at the federal level, not at the ultimate White House level. They have not achieved those turnouts. Make it social, folks. I want to join in. Our last point, number 7, integrate everything. I'm going to give you a quick peek at our dashboard for a company called Voter Gravity. Again, it's one of many. There's one called i360. There's one called Moonshadow, one called North Star, one called Bridgetree. I can go on. Database technology is off the shelf, a la carte, do it yourself, $99 a month, any fee you can negotiate with whatever service you want to buy, and you can employ it today, right this second. The code is written. The developers stand by at the help desk. You can find a tool that works on your smartphone, that works on your tablet, that works on your device, that you can start heat mapping and drawing maps that make you walk more doors, talk to more voters, touch more neighborhoods, and get home in time for dinner right this second. There's no threshold. There's no barrier to entry. All there is a short, quick learning curve. If you understand walk sheets, if you understand Google Maps, if you understand how to press yes or no, a red or green button, then you understand database technology. That's the dashboard of Voter Gravity. It simply tells you how many folks in that area have registered, are registered voters, how many are likely voters for this fictitious candidate named Washington. It has a real-time countdown clock to the election, has volunteers on the right-hand side. Happy to send you to votergravity.com or any of those others I've talked to in the past. It's a tool. It's one more in our arsenal. It produces real metrics that educate decisions and messaging moving forward. If you've talked to a voter and they say, no, I hate government being so big. No, I hate ACA. No, I don't want X, Y, or Z. Then you've got a point from which to tailor all future communications. You've got a hinge point and a pivot point from which to talk to them as you talk in those live phone calls and live live door knocks. Integrate your message, your manpower, and your money. The 3 M's, message, manpower, and money into one platform. Use that for your volunteers. Use it for your candidate. It's the equivalent of Henry Ford cranking up his assembly line. It's the equivalent of letting those volunteers who've gone with barcodes and bubble sheets and pencils and pens and clipboards all these years start exponentially increasing their yield, start exponentially increasing their turnout at the end of every day, their results, rather, at the end of every day. That will result in more voters. That will result in more engagement. And again, when people see this 9, 10, 7, 8 months ahead of time, what is their response? What is their response when someone sees smiling, friendly, happy volunteers who are well-dressed, well-prepared, and able to use technology right there seamlessly, fluidly, effortlessly, and quickly and painlessly at their door? What do they think about that campaign? Charlie Sheen, right? Winning. Period. This group is well-oiled. This group is doing it the way it should be done. What leads to better results, cost savings, and real metrics? Data integration and technology. Again, putting all that back in the hands of that centralized database that's in the heart of the campaign, having someone who understands and can sift through it and direct volunteers. I know it's beyond most of our pay grades. The man in the back is probably someone to speak to immediately about data engineering and social media, but all of us can do our part. All of us can learn this one more facet of campaign technology. Joe, I think I've got 2 minutes. Can I take one more question?
Yes.
Your question, sir.
How effective do you think it will be for people who know how to use Facebook? And
Please, it's your dais, of course.
A lot of people are familiar with Facebook that aren't using all the other tools. And one of the things that we try and do with this convention is that when we read articles on Breitbart or other news sources that we really feel resonate with the people, we share them all over. It's so easy to just click that share button.
It is.
And bring that article to the attention of all the people that you know, encourage them to share it, and we can send our message out exponentially just by doing that simple thing.
And humbly and respectfully, I would say there is a time for education, there is a time for information, there is a time to disseminate all these ideas and all these position papers and all these revealing exposés, but at some point, you've got to decide if you're in the game or not, right? At some point, you have to decide if the candidate or cause is worthy of your support, no matter what, warts and all, and if you're going to go out, and if the alternative is worse. And that's our message, is how to mobilize and organize and beat the left at their own game, at doing those techniques. Can I do one more, Joe?
Do one more.
One more. This lady right here.
Can you explain what a soft voter is?
A soft voter is somebody who might vote, might not, could be persuaded, could not.
But how do you identify them in the data?
You see them, how many times they've turned out. Again, behavior. And you have a record of this every single cycle, midterm, local election, special election. They're not super voters. Super voters are the ones that come to all those. But a soft voter is somebody who needs a very, very strong pull. Again, if you don't have to go if you don't have to persuade voters or go to independents or others, go to the targeted voters. Turn out the base. Turn out the folks you know are going to show up and overwhelm at the polls every single time. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Matt Robbins.
Thank you very much.
And Matt is going to make this information available to us.
It is.
We will put it on the South Carolina Tea Party Coalition Facebook page as well as our website. So come look for it there.
Happy to.
And thank you so much.
Thank you,
Matt.
Joe.